Hello and welcome to Sage's Tabletop Table Talks. I'm Sage and I'm at my table and I'm going to talk to you about tabletop role-playing games. So let's walk on these eggshells, shall we? Let's talk evil races and tabletop role-playing games. This is one of those things that is very hotly talked about, and I'm of two minds of the matter. So maybe this can kind of help me out a little bit when it comes to making a decision as to kind of where I feel, because I do agree kind of with the modern idea of evil races being kind of problematic, but I also think that there's something to be said about simplicity in tabletop role-playing games. So just to start, I want to say that it is absolutely understandable why people are against evil races, because the verbiage used to talk about evil races does very much kind of coincide with certain verbiage used to justify the exploitation and genocide of people throughout history. Things like they're uncivilized, their culture is based on rape and murder, they're, you know, there's arguments about like, and it's kind of interesting because you look at the good races of humans, elves, halflings in fantasy games, and how they are all kind of just humans, and then the evil races, which tend to be orcs, goblins, trolls, tend to be very hideous and monstrous, and they very much kind of scream elements of phrenology in them. And so I think that if we are going to create evil races, it needs to be done with a great deal of care. And there is something to be said about an intelligent race of creatures. Creatures, even though like orcs may not be naturally as smart as an elf, they are still intelligent and capable of free will and decision. And the idea that all of them are evil is brings up a great deal of issues. And the big one I always point to with this is high elves and drow, and how the good-natured, heroic, good elves are all blonde hair, fair-skinned, and blue-eyed, and the evil elves are all dark-skinned, and it's like, this is a problem. And, it's less, I for some reason hear it less talked about in sci-fi, even though, like, there are certainly issues with the way things like the Romulans and the Ferengi are displayed in, Star Trek, and certainly, people have talked about uncomfortable things like the, whatever race that Jar Jar Binks belongs to. I can't remember. I'm not a big Star Wars fan. Star Wars doesn't really appeal to me. I kind of like Star Trek. Star Trek's better. Honestly, when it comes to sci-fi series, I'm a Lex man. Like, Lex is my favorite, but none of you have actually ever seen Lex, so it doesn't matter. But don't watch Lex because it is very much, it requires a very certain, and there's a cat in front of my camera. Hi, Jelly. How about we get off the table? You're not allowed on the table. Man, I was doing a real good stream of videos without the cats ruining my vibe, but here we are. But anyway, yeah, so anyway, so I mean, like I said, the way evil races are kind of handled is a problem. Jelly, what are you doing? This is our kitten Jelly. Yeah. My kid named her. She's annoying, but there she is. Say hi, everybody. I got mitten paws. Are you gonna go be good now? Come. There you go. Come on. There you go, sweetie. But anyway, so yeah. But for some reason, and it could just be the circles I run in, because a lot of my friends prefer fantasy over sci-fi. A lot of people I know prefer fantasy over sci-fi, and a lot of us just prefer fantasy gaming because, like, when it comes to movies, books, television, I prefer sci-fi. But for some reason, when it comes to gaming, I prefer fantasy. So obviously, that could be part of the issue. Is the I don't think I'm getting rid of jelly, guys. Please don't knock my camera over, okay? Um, So that could all be that could just be something about the circles that I belong to. Just preferring. So there's more talk about fantasy than there is about sci-fi. Even though me and Josh just did a big long video about how much we love MechWarrior. But anyway, so like I said, so however, on the other side, I think there's something to be said about simplicity in tabletop gaming, like. Because I've mentioned this before about how our lives are in just bombarded with moral decisions and people telling us what is and isn't right and the kind of choices we have to make. And, here in America, because I'm American, we have presidential elections every 4 years, which means the cycle is 2 years of being told everything the president does wrong, and then 2 years of the potential next presidents telling us everything that they're gonna fix that they're not actually gonna fix. So like, and then just generally speaking, like somebody says something that you're uncomfortable with, and then you have to decide like, is this conversation is cutting this person out of your life going to ruin yours because it means that you might have to exit us. There's just a lot of moral choices that are bombarded with us every day. There's something to be said about a world of fantasy or sci-fi where there is just a bad entity, a bad group, just that are just evil. They are just unquestionably evil, and there's no moral quandary about fighting them. Now, obviously, that's not universally true because a lot of people out there. Come on, Jelly. Thank you. I think she settled down beside my camera. There's a lot of people out there who do like those difficult moral choices, and good on them. And absolutely, by all means, create a gray and gray morality kind of world. There's a lot of that in MechWarrior, where honestly there really aren't good factions in MechWarrior. Basically, the clans are all psycho. The inner sphere houses are all infighting children. Comstar is just a shadow government that runs everything because I don't know, that's how shadow governments work. And happily assassinate and destroy anything that's a challenge to their power. So, like I said, there's a place for that, but there's also a place for just, good, mindless good versus evil action, because sometimes it just feels nice to be able to play a hero, just a big hero who doesn't have to decide these kind of huge moral choices. And, and of course, there's some solutions to that, although some of them are, I think, people don't really realize. So, like, people talk about undead as a counterpoint in fantasy, and maybe, machines or clones as a counterpart in sci-fi. And I do think those work. One of the big problems with undead is undead are, generally speaking, mindless. And so, like, there has to be, like, a person behind it. And sometimes you're not looking for a single person just to be, like, one bad guy who just kind of... Because one bad guy with that kind of power does kind of create a lot of weird instances where it's like, oh, yes, there's one evil guy in this entire world. And people mention demons. The problem with demons is... like, especially if you're playing D&D 5th edition, those kind of work. But when you incorporate the forces of heaven and hell into your main narrative, you pretty much are locked into an apocalyptic scenario. It's very hard to feel like fighting an army of demons is a local problem. So if you're kind of trying to create a pulpish world, demons don't really work because they're too big, too epic for that. Another solution is nations. So creating like an evil nation. Blue Rose does this. They have a nation ruled by a Lich King. But another thing with the undead is when you incorporate intelligent undead, like vampires say, one of the things people neglect to mention is that a lot of what the vampire mythos is tribalism, it is racism, it is the idea that these Eastern Europeans, people who are like from, Eastern Europe, the kind of Russia-ish area, it was meant to be as like a scared pact against the weird culture over there in countries like, Romania and stuff like that. And so, vampires, as we know them, find their origin, much like goblins, in racism, much like orcs, much like drow elf. So to use a vampire, you do still encounter some of the same problems you would with those evil races. Jelly, what are you doing, kitten? But like I said, I think that another option is evil nations, but once again, you kind of get this issue where, like I said, Blue Rose does it. They have a nation ruled by a lich. And you kind of get this issue of, once again, once you've created a culture of evil, you have to be very careful because, once again, the language of why this nation is bad still can be used to kind of incorporate certain moralism, certain tribalist, certain bigoted concepts, There's a game, and I cannot remember it, and it's a sci-fi game, and I cannot remember what it's called, but one of the alien races is a group of aliens, and males dress in feminine clothing, females dress in masculine clothing. They paint their warships in garish colors, because to them, bad fashion is like psychically damages them. The men are all super flamboyant and speak with lisps, and the women are all super butch. And Jelly, get off the table. Come on, off. Jelly, off the table. Come on. You're gonna knock my stuff over. You're not even allowed on the table anyway. Quit. But the men and the women are all very butch and wear denim and and it's like, oh, this is super uncomfortable. And generally speaking, they're kind of considered to be a bad alien race, and you're like, yeah, okay, this is just one giant homophobic joke, and it's a little uncomfortable to read. And so once again, I guess technically that is an alien species, but I still bring it up, like, when you invent these new, you got to be careful, because sometimes your bigotry's showing, guys. But like I said, you still end up with some similar things to work at when you're talking just about a nation that's bad. And if the only thing in the nation that's bad is the king and the general people are good, you end up with this situation again where, when fighting the armies of Karen, the Lich Nation, these guys who are fighting because they're conscripted and because they're brainwashed by the evil king, you once again are like, okay, can I kill them? Because it's like not their fault they're conscripted. They're part of the army, because if they're not, their families get black bagged. They're or they're just so brainwashed because they've never had experience, but they've been told, indoctrinated their entire lives about how the only way to maintain society is through the iron fist, and that these people over here are a danger to our way of life, and a lot of that stuff. And then you get to this point where it's like, is it okay to kill these shock troopers? Like, and you're at this like moral question. And Blue Rose is a bad example for this because Blue Rose has a lot of that kind of high romantic fantasy, and there's a lot of like, oh, yes, there is bad, but these bad boys and fighting isn't the core concept of Blue Rose. But it's a good example because I think the Lich King Nation is a good example of them trying to take this idea of an evil race and instead turning it into an evil nation, and still how there's a lot of like very like, oh man, we have to do a lot of moral questioning about the things we're doing. And some people just don't want the game. Sometimes you just want to be able to, smack a baddie with a bit of metal because, for God's sakes, you want to forget about the world for, 4 hours a week, whatever. Obviously, the best solution is undead, automaton. Mindless undead or robots are the best solution because morally it's but you still get to the point where if you want to build a world up, you have to have a reason for the undead and the automaton, and maybe it is a matter of a single powerful lich that you want the players to try to overcome or something like that. Or the Empire decides that human soldiers are too questionable. They sometimes question authority. Sometimes they don't do exactly what you want them to do. So you build machines in order to as your soldiers, because machines don't question orders. Machines don't have moral quandaries to kill children and women. Machines do what they're programmed to do and nothing else. And so something like that. And I do think that solution's easier in a sci-fi setting because machines, for I don't know, man, maybe it's just me, machines are more interesting than undead. They're more interesting than skeletons and zombies. So obviously that'd be a thing. And I don't know, like I said, I don't have a perfect solution because outside of creating an armies of mindless entities, which is your best solution, realistically, your best solution is zombies and robots. Of course, you're doing something contemporary, but like they're like if you're doing superheroes, obviously you can just use thugs. And generally, in most superhero games, killing is an option. So if you hit a guy with your fire blast, even though it's fire, it still tends to like not be fatal. Even though burning someone is like a horrific thing to do, like it's like even second degree burns are like nightmarish things that you never fully recover from. But hurling a fireball at a thug's chest tends to not worry about that. And obviously that's something you can just do, is just and especially in a sci-fi game, just be like, oh yeah, our lasers aren't fatal. Yeah, the evil, empire has human enemies, but our beams are mostly stun. Our beams are all stun beams, so we zap them, they fall unconscious for, a couple hours, and then, but, somebody who's unconscious for 4 hours is no longer a threat in combat. You've gone and you've already done what you need to do. Things like that. Insectoid enemies seem to be actually really useful because the whole hive mind thing. Oh my gosh, jelly off the table. Insectoid enemies for some reason seem to just always have a hive mind build, and they're always kind of interesting to use. Like if you don't want to just use zombies and robots, you can use like what are those ant people called in D&D, like myconids or something, or like Zerg and StarCraft. Those are always useful. But yeah, like I said, I don't have a perfect solution to it. And certainly your campaign is determinative of how you want to do it, because obviously if you want, I mean, you can run a campaign based on moral ambiguity and, you know, make orcs into like jelly off the table. You're not allowed on the table anyway. Make orcs into sympathetic enemies and create like this huge I like to, and I started a campaign and it never got to fruition, unfortunately, where it turned out the high elves were all actually evil, and that like huge portions of the world were just indoctrinated into their imperialism, um, or indoctrinated into their imperialism. So like, you could do something like that if you want to do something morally ambiguous. Um, you know, like I said, obviously there's a whole lot of, you know, solutions to these problems. And it all depends on how you want to do it. Or you could just simply throw everybody into a loop and just make the elves the bad guys. The elves are just Imperial Rome or whatever. Like, you know, so many sci-fi games for some reason are obsessed with like Imperial men becoming like an evil Roman Empire, which is, I don't know. I think it's kind of boring and cliche, but fuck it. You know, cliche, yeah, we act like we don't use cliches in our games all the time. So, obviously, that's one of the ways to do it. Just if you're going to create an evil race or an evil nation in your game, just kind of be careful and very much be open to if somebody playing or just, you know, whatever kind of tells you, like, hey, man, like, this is your bad guys feel very Roma. Like, maybe you want to change your, you know, bad guys. This idea of a traveling caravans who wear bright colors, who are all, you know, baby stealing thieves. Maybe you want to change a couple things there because there's something very Roma. Or, like, you know, oh, your evil empire all have, you know, grass skirts and big head. Off the table, Jelly. You know, big oxhide spear, you know, shields and these, you know, it's like, oh, you know, maybe you might want to change some things. This is feeling very, oh, the reason that it's okay to kill them all is because they're savage murderers, and no, you're not on the table. Are all savage murderers who need to be, you know, taught the ways of respectable man, and you kind of see this a lot in like Victorian stuff. Where like the great exploration and they're all fighting, like they're all going across like the untamed jungles and forests and dealing with savage men, and you're like, oh my god, like I like pulp as much as the next guy, but let's leave that in the past, shall we? But yeah, like I said, there's no real perfect solution that I have. I mean, obviously, there are people out there who are smarter than I am, who know more than I am, who are more aware of some of these problems than I am. I just kind of wanted to weigh my thoughts into it, because I do think that there's a lot of important discussion to be had about evil races and the problematic issues of it, but also the importance of having a defined army of villains that's okay to kill, because like I said, you don't always want to have huge morally ambiguous black and black or black and gray morality games. Sometimes you just want a black and white morality game, because, you know, sometimes these games are escapist rather than a reflection of our world. So just be careful, and one of the most important things to do is be open-minded and listen to people who might feel uncomfortable with these things. Off the table. I'm getting real tired of telling you, Jelly. But anyway, next time, I'm going to record these 2 episodes back to back, so it's next week for you, but here about 5 minutes for me. A much lighter topic. One I'm actually really excited to talk about, because it's one I've hinted at a number of times before, and it's one I have a lot of actually really good ideas on what to do with it, and a lot of really kind of fun ways to play with it. So it'll be way, way less heavy than this one. But anyway, I will see you guys next week. Something fun sign off.